If you have spent any time online in the last 5 to 10 years, you have heard terms like online learning, e-learning, remote learning, and hybrid learning tossed around in an almost interchangeable way. But do they all really mean the same thing? On today's episode, I'm going to tease out my latest findings and maybe even settle the matter once and for all. So stick around, you don't want to miss this one. Hello and welcome to the Online Educators Forum. I'm your host, Reverend Dr. Lindsay Andreolli-Comstock, and today I am answering one of the most asked questions in online education. What in the world is the difference between all these different types of learning? We hear these terms tossed around to refer to different schools, different programs, and different online events. But do we really know what we mean when we use them? Well, we've done some research over here at the Online Educators Forum, and I think we have some helpful answers for those of you in the industry. Of course, not everyone will agree with our explanations, but if nothing else, perhaps this discussion will prompt us all to think a little more intentionally about how we identify our programs. So, let's dig in. Online education, the term we use here at the forum, is defined as the process of receiving or giving systematic instruction through electronic devices like computers, mobile phones, tablets, or laptops using an internet connection. Online education, like online learning, is a broad term, but perhaps one of the most encompassing of the dozen or so currently being tossed around. We use the term online education at the forum because we are referring to the entire industry of education online. Online learning as a term, however, only refers to the receiving of this systematic instruction. So, very similar term, but a difference in perspective. Online education is the system as a whole. Online learning refers to what a student is receiving or doing. And so, in turn, online teaching is the yin to online learning's yang. It refers to the giving of systematic instruction online. So, online education, big picture, all-encompassing. Online learning, student perspective. Online teaching or online instruction, teacher perspective. All three refer to systematic instruction through electronic devices using an internet connection, or online for short. Clear as mud? Good. Let's keep going. So, quick question. Are online learning and distance or remote learning the same thing? You guessed it. No, they are not the same thing. Online learning, as I mentioned before, is a broad term like online education. It simply refers to how a student receives systematic instruction. That means online learning can refer to a 30-minute internet-based reading program that a traditional classroom instructor facilitates in their brick-and-mortar classroom, as much as it can to a whole course that is conducted and graded online. Remote learning, however, only refers to online learning that occurs because of the lack of physical presence and traditional face-to-face interaction. Even though the teacher and students might only be a couple of miles apart, remote learning is how learning can continue during things like a viral pandemic. In many cases, remote learning is intended to be temporary. Distance learning is slightly different as well. This particular type of online learning refers to learning that occurs online in spite of the physical distance between the students and instructors, or instructors, students, and institution. Distance learning is the means by which many post-secondary schools welcome international students into their virtual classrooms. This type of learning is largely intentional. Remote learning and distance learning, very similar, but also not exactly the same thing. So while online education is the biggest umbrella that we are looking at today, online learning is also an umbrella, with many versions of it occurring in different ways for different reasons. Next up, blended learning versus hybrid learning. Well, by definition, they also appear to be basically the same thing. It just seems like a combination of offline learning and online learning. Well, there is one small difference worth noting, however. According to Jeremy Hess from CloudShare, while blended learning focuses on a set ratio and combination of offline and online instruction, hybrid learning seeks to find a flexible balance of online and offline that promotes the best experience, even down to the individual student. In other words, blended learning is interested in a balanced learning experience across two mediums, online and offline, while hybrid learning replaces much of its in-person teaching with live software-based trainings that can simulate real-life situations in ways that help students learn online while still being hands-on in their own home. It's less about online and offline and more about using technology in any means necessary to help students learn where they are. So, blended learning. Think of a little bit of online learning and a little bit of traditional face-to-face learning tossed together in a blender. Hybrid learning is more of a specialized learning experience that uses internet and software to create a unique hands-on learning experience at home. So let's recap. We've gone over online education, online learning versus online teaching or instruction. Under the online learning umbrella, we have discussed the differences between remote and distance learning, and we just covered the very fine line that separates blended learning from hybrid learning. Now, the last and perhaps most confusing terms in the industry, virtual learning and e-learning. Like seriously, could we have made this any more complicated for ourselves? Okay, first off, these are the terms I see most commonly misused. They are where people start referring to things based on what sounds trendy rather than what actually describes their course or their program. But there's hope, because I think these terms are actually easier to understand than many of the ones we've already gone over. So, virtual learning and e-learning. Here is the key difference. The amount of interaction involved. That's it. The discernible difference between these two is the amount of interaction involved. Virtual learning, a type of online learning, has more interactions between students and instructors, while e-learning, also a type of online learning, is largely self-paced. So while a virtual learning experience may have an online chat room, webinars, and maybe even a weekly Zoom call, e-learning is largely just the student and the online content. Most self-paced, on-demand online learning courses are actually e-learning experiences, but not all of them. You see, a self-paced, on-demand course can also have live instructor interactions via an asynchronous chat room, or it could offer an invitation to an ongoing social media community group, which would technically make it a virtual learning experience. So, what's the point of all of this? Well, as coordinators, facilitators, administrators, and instructors of online education, we need to know what we mean when we create and publicize our courses and programs. If we, as the leaders in the system, are not referring to things correctly, it's very likely that those enrolling in our programs and courses are going to be confused as well. A solid online learning experience for any learner begins the minute they click to learn more. It is our job as online educators to ensure that from the first click until the last, our students have a clear, accessible, discernible, and inspiring online learning experience. Well, folks, that's our show for today. If you are interested in more online education resources, visit sgcitizenry.com and click the Academy tab at the top of your screen. This is the Online Educators Forum. We'll see you next time.